Hey, brass facts here. Suppressors are probably more popular than ever, but are also, relatively speaking, probably one of the most misunderstood pieces of equipment that you can buy from the perspective of a prepared citizen. Really, only comms and night vision seem to generate more vitriol, drama, and brand loyalty-infused turret-throwing matches than suppressors. Combined with the limited ownership due to the near year-long wait when buying one of these things, comprising of 6 months of waiting and 4 months of also waiting while refreshing the NFA Form 4 Reddit super thread, only to have it stall right before it hits your control number. I'm not bitter, you're bitter. We're all bitter, fuck the NFA. Recently, there's been a big focus on demystifying suppressors, such as someone with like Pew Science, probably the biggest aggregator of industry suppressor noise metrics, with an express focus on sound proximal to the shooter. Sound report measurements, despite all the controversies, is still one of the more objective, maybe only objective thing that you can quantify regarding a suppressor. So for most, this information combined with the price and mounting options make up the lion's share of consumer purchasing decision, at least when I asked a friend over at the biggest suppressor retailer. If your goal here is to prevent hearing loss, then yeah, sound reduction is incredibly important, and that should be your primary goal then. Think home defense, hunting, or making that 22 LR meme gun stupid quiet so you can shoot at bottles with the boys while camping. There's also very specialized weapons like a PDW with subsonic ammunition, or 300 Blackout with the same. Those benefit greatly from cans with high sound suppression ability as well. But really, most people are buying suppressors for a fighting rifle. This video is sponsored by, well, me actually. I made another set of patches in preparation for SHOT Show. These ones are leather, kind of cool, kind of subtle as well. You got about 2 weeks from the time of this video to buy them, and then I'm going to give out the rest of them at SHOT Show. So yeah, check it out. Link down below. Help me pay for my $1,000 tiny disgusting hotel and the insane amount of liquor I'll be consuming in 2 weeks. And I guess also support me heading down there and doing SHOT Show content. I guess. Real quick, a couple disclaimers. I know everyone hates them. Consider them payment for you to watch this video. Well, actually, that was the ad. The ad was the payment for you to watch the video, so I don't know what this is. I've shot a ton of suppressors and I have a lot of anecdotal experience with them, but ultimately I've only really decided I wanted to do this video recently, so that means a lot of the footage is only about 6 rifle suppressors. So don't view this as a buy this suppressor or don't buy this suppressor. I was working with what I had, and the video is ultimately geared more towards the theory behind suppressor and general trends than any particular brand. Secondly, since I'm talking about the context of fighting rifles, I'll be dabbling in, frankly, stuff out of my lane. Here I'll do my best to keep the information based, and I'll have someone that has been there, has done that, to give this video a once-over before release. But do keep in mind, I'm basically a no one in this context, so some data may in fact be misleading or wrong. I'm not saying that to cover my ass, I'm just saying that to remind you of those that do to not put me on a pedestal. There are a lot of other people that could do my job better. Finally, for the sake of keeping things trim, I'm going to call small cans that are roughly less than 5 inches K cans. Most of these are labeled as such in their name. I'm going to call regular cans or duty cans, and those are about 6 inches or so. And then we have the Chungus Among Us performance cans, which are about 10 inches. Okay, let's get into it. Sound on a two-way range. Let's talk about the performance here. Because sound, it kind of spreads universally, it follows the inverse square law. And for every unit of distance that is increased, we notice an exponential amount of sound drop off. So past an arbitrary mark of 100 yards, we notice a very unique kind of shift in how sound performance kind of is observed downrange. Which, yeah, we put a microphone and people downrange of a gun. Don't worry, we didn't like them very much, so it's okay. So there's 3 distinct profiles. So we have muzzle at the target. That means the noise is coming directly at the target, and the target is obviously taking fire. Then we have muzzle near the target, or muzzle even potentially on target, but concealed. So this is like concealed fire, keyhole shooting, but you're still roughly taking fire, or you're in the 180 of the sound profile. And then we have third-party fire. So the muzzle is definitely not pointed at the person. In fact, there might be stuff in the way. Consider this being third-party to a gunfight. Muzzle's not at you. Okay, there are obviously many more scenarios. I'd love to do another test down the line, perhaps that is more product-oriented, but I'm a washed-up YouTuber, so this is what you get. Very important to note that the testing conditions here were in an open field with minimal deflection points and irregular shapes. This is about the worst case scenario in terms of the suppressor doing suppressor things. Urban, forested, really anything other than a lake bed, the sound report could be very conservatively argued to be cut in half. Okay, let's start with the taking fire scenario. The muzzle is pointed roughly in your direction and you're quote-unquote taking fire. Within 100 yards, there really may as well not be a suppressor. It's all loud as shit. In a blind test, it was all functionally the same, everyone was miserable, and I'm sure the snail in our ear incurred permanent damage. Pushing out to 150, 200 yards is where things finally get interesting. Unsuppressed, still comically loud, very boomy. But for a suppressor, well, not at all what one would consider quiet, we're noticing that the sound is now distinctly different in how it's presented. If we isolate the sound away from the sonic boom by, pointing the gun in a different direction, we get a very distinctly low tone and very short and envelope style sound. Combined with the sonic boom of the sound, which we hear first because it's created as the supersonic round passes perpendicular to us, beating the gunshot by about 1/20th a second. So we hear the snap, then we hear the boom. When we add an object in the way to break up the report of the muzzle, even if it's a basic 10-foot high mound of dirt near the shooter, we found the muzzle report is so dull or low in tone, it's hard to differentiate from the long duration boom from the sonic boom. Which, remember, that's not affected from having obstacles in the way because the boom always happens near the observer. It's worth highlighting that despite the noise reduction, we can still very clearly hear the suppressor and locate the origin shot. However, in a real-world, non-alerted, higher rate of fire setting, you may realistically begin to confuse the sonic boom as the source or have the sonic boom obfuscate the origin of the gunfire as reverb begins to overlap on top of the gunshot. I've noticed this a lot anecdotally. Many times in training scenarios where, for example, we're doing bounding fire or sniper overwatch or something to that effect, and I actually couldn't mentally figure out the origin of the friendly suppressing fire, despite actually knowing roughly where he was for safety reasons. Tight valleys, which actually could be viewed as analogs to city blocks, tend to play havoc on your echolocation ability due to the sound essentially just pinballing back and forth between the valleys. So you have the sonic boom and the gunshot bouncing all around, and you may end up in scenarios where your brain gets false feedback and confuses the reverb off of the wrong mountain as the origin of the gunshot. Even when I knew exactly where the shooter is, my echolocation just refused to believe that, which is a very odd feeling having your senses firmly disagree with what you know. Even in situations where I could potentially figure out the origin through this auditory cacophony, it requires me to focus for a bit to try to catch the suppressed noise between the mess of sound, which takes time, presence of mind, and focus. Anyway, as we move out to what we would consider probably sniper fire range, 500 yards or so, this effect exists still, but is very much amplified. Here's a good time to probably mention, every single sonic boom you hear is loud enough to cause hearing damage. Unfortunately, the microphone can't pick that up. However, the sound of the suppressed noise that you hear after the sonic boom is not peaking the mic and would be roughly comparable what you would hear in the moment. Add any kind of deflection to the noise, so for example, keyhole shooting, or in our case, shooting out of the back of a car, or just having big things in the way, and the gunshot may actually begin to enter the realm of undetectable. Okay, if we observe third-party fire, so essentially the muzzle is no longer pointed at us and the target is, somewhere over there. So we observe no sonic boom and we're getting basically secondhand sound as the sound is going to bounce off of something and then hit us. Our question is, at what point and how many obstacles does suppressed fire eliminate the ability of a third party to observe said gunfire? In a wide open field at about 700 yards with a mountain in the way, does suppressed fire finally drop below the volume threshold of your well-rested breathing?
Was the flow better?
Moving on to Turbo K.
Hard to tell.
Stand by.
This is 6 shot right here.
Turbo K next. To put a finer point about how quiet suppressors are at this point, we basically were talking and waiting for the person to shoot without realizing he had already done it. And then, on the radio it was super confusing. I actually already shot. Maybe you guys should shut up, etc. So, yeah, keep that in mind. At about 500 yards with a mound of dirt in the way, does it drop below footstep or gravel noise? Real-world scenarios massively changed this so much so that I think this part of the test was bordering on practically useless. By simply moving the muzzle away, 180 from the listener, you already cut the sound report in half, but you add man-made objects, bundles of them, entire cities of them, and noise begins to fall off a cliff rapidly. That's no exaggeration. Even shooting around or through windows of cars cuts noise report in half. Keyhole shooting out of a house cuts it in half further. This is incredibly difficult for me to test and quantify, and anecdotally speaking here, I can't tell you the amount of times I was just out of suppressed fire range because, well, if I can't hear it, I can't hear it, and if I can't hear it, I can't tell. All I can say roughly is that sound drop-off tends to happen way faster than you think, especially if the shooter is in a building, or especially a different city block, even in the context of supersonic rounds. Now, this gets a little bit into quote-unquote game theory, but I'm of the opinion that having your, envelope or report of your quote-unquote gunfight or weapons discharge be as small as possible is incredibly useful. Not necessarily in this case for those that you're fighting, but for those that may want to third-party in on the situation. People that play video games know exactly what third-partying means, but for those that don't, it's essentially when a different group that was not aware of your presence hears the gunfight and thinks, I want to get in on this, or at least get in on the aftermath of something like that. Alright, that was a bit long, but let's kind of address how the different types of suppressors handled the scenario. The short answer is just look at the waveforms. Bigger cans, mo better, K cans, mo worse. And while not in the purview of this video, TP9 and subsonic rounds are hilariously quiet, like airsoft here. The long answer is they're all the same. Remember, we're holding our breath, trying to hear nuance in a can while rooting for our favorite ones. In fact, sometimes the downrange listening crew confuse the loudest can for one of the quietest cans that we use that day. Real-world downrange usage, the real-world downrange usage of simply trying to obfuscate sound instead of the impossible task of silence it has me thinking that a couple of dB differences across the entire range of suppressors doesn't matter as much as we probably think it does. Now, there's nothing wrong with a quieter can here. After all, maximize the value of your money. Just realize there's more to the puzzle than that. And chasing sound to the exclusion of all else will probably not do much more than bragging rights at point-blank range for Instagram shots. It also portrays that tone seems to matter a lot here, and some cans that we noticed that had lower, in theory, peak dB came off to the listener as vastly quieter.
How's that? Interesting. It's very delicious. I like it a lot.
You can almost feel it, right?
You pass me?
You want some more?
Okay, next up, visual signature. Something I see repeated a lot is, I don't have my suppressor for sound suppression purposes, I have it for visual signature reduction. This is a good example of people regurgitating what they heard on the internet without thought. I think the original quote was probably just signature reduction, not visual signature reduction, but whatever, okay, guilty as charged on this one to be honest. But really, most flash hiders, including a basic A2, are really going to give most suppressors not just a run for their money, but in many ways probably exceed their performance when you consider first round pop. That being said, flash suppression is probably one of the most important things to consider with a suppressor on a two-way range. There's a reason why video games have exaggerated muzzle reports, to make the game fair. We have no such compunction though. And when comparing suppressors, this is especially important to focus on. Unlike downrange sound, there is a wide range of performance difference across the spectrum of cans. Alright, we're gonna have a bit of a skill issue moment here. While it's pretty easy to see flash report to the human eye at most times of the day, cameras are really bad at picking it up, so a lot of footage you're gonna see here is just gonna be under night vision, not because it's the only time flash signature is relevant or visible, but because it's the only footage where I can actually show flash signature. There's only about a 10 to 20 minute window during twilight where the human eye can both see the target and the camera can see the flash report. Before that, it's too bright to pick up on flash on camera, and after that, it's too dark for the human to see the target, so you use a white light, and then that completely blows out the shot. So yeah, like I said, skill issue? Sorry. When hunting down the best flash suppressing suppressor, what a sentence. The general rule of thumb is more internal volume, or size the can has, the less flash you'll experience, because the can can do its job better. Keeping the can the same, you'll find longer cans produce less flash, and shorter cans produce more flash, in general. Something like the RC2, which is a dedicated, full-size 5.56 can, exhibits almost 100% flash reduction to the naked eye, front on by about 30 yards. To the shooter, it's functionally invisible.
Nothing. I'm saying. Nothing.
Cool.
The Resonator K ends up as the counter opposite to this, especially when shot with 5.56. It's small, K-can sized, a fixed 30 cal end cap, and a 30 cal, bore. This thing spits fireballs basically no matter what that are both visible many hundreds of yards downrange and can be, especially with 5.56 short barreled usage, debilitating to the shooter, which is why that can is not really meant for those types of guns.
Nice fireballs, jackass.
We get the final piece of the pie if we look at something like the Resonator R2, which is basically just that Resonator K we just showed you, but with way more internal volume, and you can put that on a short barrel rifle and it's not going to flash that bad. It's going to look mostly like most duty style cans. That's not to say all K cans suck at flash suppression. For example, the Hux Flow 5.56K, the Polonium K, and to a lesser degree this YHM Turbo K all do acceptable or even well on this front in terms of flash suppression. Hop used a Punnett square in his video, and now I kind of want to use one, so yeah, generally speaking, it's going to look like this. Now, design parameters absolutely do matter. We saw how good that RC2 ended up looking. Overall, you should consider that parameter seems to be the strongest indicator of flash performance downrange, with design, filling out that last 10 to 20%. There is one Achilles heel here, first round pop. All cans exhibit a trait called first round pop. Typically this is talked about with sound report, but is really probably far more detrimental in terms of flash signature. From what I understand, first round pop is when the first shot consumes all of the oxygen in the suppressor to produce a more energetic muzzle report and boom. From here, the can ends up sort of being purged, and due to the design, it takes about 30 seconds to a minute for the air to replace itself with fresh oxygen. Here the trends still hold true, with bulk parameters taking a front seat. Can size, bore size play a major role, with barrel and design and end cap size taking up a less, but still significant role in preventing massive first round fireballs. Next up, let's talk about night vision. Comparing these things under night vision, all of what we've discussed thus far are just exaggerated, as night vision devices are way more sensitive, literally by several orders of magnitude. Also, pet Brock theory, I believe combustion and heat produce way more IR than visual, so I think it's even further exaggerated here. Maybe. Up close to shooter and to those around him, most cans hit the threshold of where they're not really an issue, you're not going to be blinded by your suppressor, and most actually just cause a single frame of auto gating regardless. Downrange signature here has the RC2 as a real winner, as I believe this is the only can that under certain lighting conditions and angles produces zero downrange flash under night vision. That is very impressive. There are other cans out there that can probably do this, especially maybe oversized cans, but personally I've yet to actually observe it outside of the RC2, and the RC2 is a duty size can to be sure. I kind of want one now, despite how stupid that muzzle attachment system is. Anyway, a secondary lesser point to bring up here is that from the perspective of observing, really only the RC2 had such a low signature that you might reasonably miss it. I find all other cans under night vision will produce a large enough signature that you're like, oh yeah, that's a signature right there. It doesn't really matter all that much past a certain point how big or how small the glowing flashing orb that you see in the distance, that it's in conjunction with a gunshot. You can see it no matter what. But to be sure, that is my very, very unprofessional opinion. Interestingly though, when you mag dump, it doesn't matter what can you're using, including the RC2, the performance converges roughly to be the same, as I guess what's happening is you're pressurizing the tube and a lot of the flash hiding effect seems to disappear under night vision, which is really cool because you don't actually observe this in the visual spectrum. Oh, a quick point to mention here, titanium cans. These are very lightweight, but they vomit what I assume is the brittle titanium oxide layer out the front, which ignite and then cause a spark shower, which is very visible. These cans are nearly exclusive to those that want to save weight for hunting applications, so we're not really interested in these for, semi-auto fighting rifle usages. There's also flow cans. These are so limited at the present time, it's hard to make sweeping statements on here, so I'm going to talk about the Flow 556 Huxworks can. This thing, flash-wise, behaves visually better than most K cans and pretty average under nods, so nothing special there. There's one final aspect to consider with suppressors, and that is visual glow. Suppressors in a civilian context are very difficult to get glowing in the visual spectrum. You can do it, but you generally have to want to do it. It's going to take about 2 to 5 minutes, and it's going to be so faint that it ends up being a novelty that you'll try to post on Instagram before realizing your camera can't even pick it up. So it's not something we're really worried about. Glowing red hot like those suppressor burn down videos of Tarkov does not practically happen in real life, not on semi-auto for civilians. However, under NV, it's a completely different story. Suppressors by design let gas expand, which is an exothermic process, or better put, ooga booga, we turn bang into hot. And because 99% of cans have relatively good heat capacity because they're metal and thermal conductivity, they tend to grab and hold onto that heat fairly stubbornly. The spark notes of it is baffles produce heat is absorbed by the material, the higher temperature, the more visual glow. So small cans with less baffles actually don't glow so bad because they're not producing as much heat for a given mass, and larger baffle-dense cans actually don't glow nearly as much either. The issue is where we start putting a lot of baffles in less mass. Longer answer here is going to be design related. So for example, tubeless designs are a big culprit of being glowy boys under night vision. They're really nice for weight and cost savings, but are a functionally one-piece design, so electron soup and its consequences mean these tend to reach the temperature of the baffle really quickly, which means they start to glow. My biggest experience with this type is roughly the Omega 300, an already lightweight can, further hampered by basically, sort of, but not really being a tubeless design. The outer sleeve is glued onto the baffle stack, so it's in permanent contact. As a result, not only does this glue tend to just become useless really quickly, as it's hilariously easy to exceed that temperature rating, but the can glows a lot, and very quickly under night vision. This does result in a meaningful real-world compromising effect after even maybe 3 or 2 magazines. Look at that dot. That dot is my can. That dot is very much more noticeable to the eye than it seems to be here because that's how night vision recording works. That dot is also only slightly dimmer than a civilian-powered emitter at the same range. Think about that for a second. Tube designs, on the other hand, not only tend to be a little bit heavier, so there's more mass, but there's also a slight air gap in most of the designs. Air turns out to be a pretty good insulator, meaning external temperatures are going to be significantly lower than internal temperatures. And these cans are actually a real chore to get visibly hot at any meaningful distance under night vision. So much so that I'd argue most tube designs are going to be a non-factor here on semi-auto fire. Flow cans once again rear their heads. We're only looking at the Hux 556K once again. Exhibits very unique performance here. Unfortunately this time on the bad side of things. I'll get more into it in my review, but the short of it is, look at the footage. The 556 Flow can is probably the worst can in terms of thermal visual signature when compared to traditional rifle cans on the market. You can buy items to mitigate this, but say it with me, not within the scope of this video. Okay, despite what the masterpieces Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 tell us, cans don't slow down bullets by double-digit percentage, but they do have trade-offs, or downsides if you will. Most of the video is mostly done here, but I do want to mention these downsides real quick. The big thing, as per usual, is weight. Weight on a suppressor is on the worst part of your rifle, all the way at the end, with many cans getting up to 15 ounces, and when you consider muzzle device, getting up close to 20 ounces, at least compared to a standard A2 birdcage. There is a reason why most high-speed dudes in the GWAT liked Mark 18s, and it's not just raw overall length for CQB. Most cans, excluding flow-style cans, like I said, its own video, also come with the enjoyment of massively increased back pressure, cyclic rate, parts wear, back pressure. For undergas rifles, this actually increases reliability by, you guessed it, adding a ton of gas to your rifle. But if you have a functioning rifle, which I hope you do, well, you now have too much gas in the system, which is a lot of fun. This bukkake of gas to the rear of the rifle both cooks and ejects all the lube out of the gun in fairly short order, and you're left with spatter to your face and arms. If you have a really bad case of overgassing, also known as suppressing a Daniel Defense Mark 18, you may even find yourself gassed out before you can even finish the magazine. Furthermore, the steady state of dirt in, dirt out that is very tame with most rifles unsuppressed tends to be pushed way down the line to more dirt combined with constant relubing, and you'll find your gun is going to look a lot like a Primordial Florida within about 1,000 rounds. What is Primordial Florida? I don't know, probably regular Florida. You can do a lot to manage this: heavier buffers, heavier springs, adjustable BCG, adjustable gas blocks, you name it. And flow cans, like I said, its own video, is a game changer in this aspect. You can also just clean the thing religiously. Suppressors are not a lot of fun. There's a reason why a lot of people jokingly say that suppressors ruin rifles. So just keep that in mind when you consider all of the benefits I've discussed thus far. Alright, let's get to the conclusion. I can already hear it. Brassvax, what suppressor should I buy? Dude, I don't know. It's not my thing. As I mentioned, if sound performance is your goal, you should razor focus on sound performance of cans. Just keep in mind that that only really tells about 50, maybe 70% of the story. Tone and other non-quantifiables will make up the rest. And that's ignoring features, mounting, and more. For other factors, what is often loosely summed up as downrange signature, a combination of larger cans exceeding at flash performance, may indicate that these are a better choice as far as signature reduction is concerned. There's a reason why these are called duty cans. However, larger cans typically represent a large overall length and weight trade-off, and testing leads me to believe that certain K cans, even in short barrel configurations, can keep up acceptably. Ultimately, I think the biggest takeaway from this entire video is just buy a suppressor and don't think about it too much. Okay, that's been a Brass Facts video with you. I'm sure that that conclusion is probably going to piss some people off, but hey, that's what we do here, I guess. I'd like to thank a number of people, you know who you are, for kind of helping me review this video, and I'd like to especially thank John from Silencer Shop. Most of these ideas are mine, but he was sure to kind of, check my math, for the lack of a better term, especially with suppressor models. Thanks for all the help and listening to my ranting in Discord DMs. I appreciate it, dude. And I appreciate you, the viewer, for suffering through this very long video. Hopefully it was useful to you, but potentially it might have just made you more confused. I don't know. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Yo.
She's a little crazy today. And yesterday.
Are they wearing you out?
That's how you pet a dog.
Proper pet.
You got vinegar on my dog.